the qualities that made, the best players 10 years ago, the best players, the majority of those are still needed, and still have a lot of value in today's game. And solvers are just another tool. I mean, trackers were a tool, equity calculators were a tool.
Hi, and welcome. It's Runchuks, and you're listening to my podcast where I explored the topics around what it takes to become a great poker player with various interesting people from in and around poker industry. Today, my guest is Phil Galfond, one of the very few people in the poker world who doesn't require an introduction. We talk about what qualities make Phil a great poker player, what's his decision-making process like, how does he think through the hand, how does he handle the stress, and of course, how does Phil see the future of the online poker? What are some of the biggest dangers that the industry is facing, and what can poker sites do to overcome those? And yes, we also talk about the Galfond Challenge. So far, Phil finished and won 2 of them. We dig deeper into how Phil managed to overcome the huge early downswing against VeniVidi to come out on top. And there's so much more. I hope you will enjoy this conversation. Phil, so happy to have you on. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And for those watching, you've been asking me to come on for a while. I agreed to it a long time ago, and then I kept being busy. So thank you for your patience.
Well, I mean, thank you for being busy, because you being busy is entertaining for all of us, right? Because it's busy for a good cause. Speaking of being busy, so where are you now? You're back in the States?
I am, yeah. I'm back in Las Vegas.
All right.
So now, for the first time all year, really, just busy with RunItOnce work. It's been poker all year up until a month ago.
All right. Well, so many topics to talk about. I think let's talk about the challenge.
Yeah.
Because that's the fun one. And then we're going to discuss the poker industry and all the changes and what you're doing with the site. But so you were pretty much a poker player for like half a year.
Yeah. It was very, very fun. I missed poker a lot. And even, over the past few years, I've been spending so much time on RunItOnce. Still played some poker here and there. Would go, up to Canada or down to Mexico for a month and play a little bit, and then would play the World Series. But realistically, there's a big difference between doing that and taking it very seriously and getting, very competitive and working on my game and things like that. So it was something that I knew that I missed, but I didn't know quite how much I missed it until it happened.
Right. So when you thought about, okay, let's have a challenge, let's get people to play me regularly. Obviously, you went for the high stakes. You went for something that's going to be not only interesting for you, but also entertaining. So, kind of killing 2 birds with one shot. But how did you feel about it? Like, I'm just thinking, if I was in your shoes and I would be away from regular poker for a while, and I know that the game moved on. I hear stories about all these guys just going crazy, study. How did you think, like, okay, I'm going to basically tell the best ones, let's play, and I can win?
I didn't know that I could win. I felt very confident that I could get close with enough study. And I actually didn't study as much as I thought I would. I thought I had a lot of time to prepare, but there was RunItOnce work to be done. So when I guess I'll take a step back. I realized how much I missed playing. This was actually, so Elliot Rowe did he hosts this, I forget what it's called, mastermind, where a bunch of people in different industries get together and have it's like a 2-day, maybe sometimes 3-day event. And he did it in Las Vegas, and he invited me. and usually charges quite a bit. He invited me to come along for free because he wanted me to try it out, and he thought I would like it. And in it, everybody gets, like, there's a lot of group discussion, but then everybody gets their turn kind of in front of the group. And I guess just to sum up, you talk about what's going on in your life, what, things that are going well, things that are going not well, things that you want. And then it kind of opens up for feedback from everybody else. These are a lot of people who, there were several poker players there, people that run businesses, a lot of other things. And so you get a lot of different perspectives. And, I talked about running the poker site and the training site, and I talked about, playing poker, and I don't really remember everything I talked about, but what happened when I kind of when it opened up for discussion is almost everybody said, and these are people who were not the poker players, although they said it as well, but actually more strongly the non-poker players did. They said, when you talk about the business, you are talking in a normal way that most people would talk, and when you would talk about playing poker, you lit up. And it was just so obvious to them that was what my passion was, and that was kind of what I needed to be doing. And so after that weekend, I didn't have any decisions made. I had resolved to find a way to play more poker. And when I thought of the challenge, it was really exciting to me because it was a way that I could play poker but still help the business, rather than just playing poker and ignoring the business and letting it fend for itself, letting my team fend for themselves. So when the idea came together, I was really excited because I got to find a way to do both. And so that's, I knew before I thought of the challenge that I wanted to play more poker, and I needed to figure out a way to do it. And the challenge idea kind of came along. As far as, who or being confident I could compete, I definitely did not, have any kind of confidence. I thought I, after some study, could be a favorite against these guys. I certainly didn't know, didn't have a lot of confidence that I would be. But I did have a lot of confidence that I could get close. I really felt that way. And with the site promotion, with the fact that, I was going to get better as I played. And the fact that, when I opened it up, I didn't know what kind of players, challengers I would get. I think because I was only going to play so many matches. You only have so much time. And I was, hoping to get a lot of offers, which I did. And I wanted to, I figured I would have some options of players who were excited to play that I actually felt confident I had an edge on. And then others that I didn't. And that is kind of what happened. And I thought for the kind of, for the show, it would be good to get a mix of kind of different types of players. And so that's what I ended up choosing. The invite to reach out to me and propose a challenge was open, but, it was up to me to choose who I went with. And I certainly didn't go with the softest, I don't even 5 or 6 matches. But I did want to get a mix, and different levels of kind of challenging myself, and also giving people kind of a different type of show to put on.
I want to touch upon 2 things here. I mean, first of all, that conversation that you had in the mastermind where people were pointing out that you're lighting up. Why do you think that is? What specifically draws you to poker? Why is poker still such a big thing? Because let's face it, I mean, you successfully transitioned to other ventures. You have a business, you have other interests in life, and yet poker seems to always be there for you, and it still maintains this special place. So why is that?
I don't know exactly. I do know a lot of players who, played for many, many years and got to a point where they were sick of it. Many who only play because it's their only way of making a lot of money, and so that's why they play that. Fortunately for me, I've always had a passion for the game. It's never left. Of course, it ebbs and flows. There are times where I could use a break, and times where I'm super excited to play. I don't exactly know why it is. I think it's human nature to gravitate towards things that you're good at, and so the fact that I'm pretty good at poker, I think, makes it fun. In running a business, there are a lot of interesting challenges, and like there are certain things I think I'm good at, certain things I think I am not, and I have to do a bit of each. And I find it challenging and fun and interesting, but I don't know. It feels more like work. Poker's a game, and at the end of the day, poker's a game, and it's competition. I'm a competitive person by nature. I think I don't come across as a competitive person, and I think I also maybe just kind of don't come across as somebody that just has like this burning like fire to play. But I really am passionate about playing poker. I really love it. I just find it really, really fun. And, to be honest, before these challenges, I would say that it ended up being more fun than I thought. Because before these challenges, I've been away from the game like at a high level for so long. And over that period of time, solvers have kind of taken center stage as, this is what poker is about now. And because I wasn't studying them and playing, I had the kind of perception that the best players were going to be the players who memorized what the solvers do the best. And I knew that I was not good at studying and not good at remembering things. I was good at figuring things out as a player. And I felt like, not only are there now answers that you need to like kind of drill into your mind, so there's less to figure out, but your opponents are now playing based on these answers drilled into their minds, so there's going to be less figuring them out. But really, like once I got back to playing, I realized it's not the case. The qualities that made the best players 10 years ago the best players, the majority of those are still needed, and still have a lot of value in today's game. And solvers are just another tool. I mean, trackers were a tool, equity calculators were a tool. And I remember, 15, 14 years ago, I was playing sit and goes, and you had like the rudimentary push fold software that you would enter like you would have to manually enter their calling ranges by position, and then they would tell you if you can shove certain hands. So there have always been tools, and they keep getting more advanced. But my perception was that a solver was in a category of its own, which, to be fair, it is. But in practical terms, it's still just a tool, and the human element still plays a very, very big role. And I can't necessarily speak to No Limit Hold'em, which I think people probably play a little bit closer to solvers than they do in PLO. But I would assume this is true there. But in PLO, nobody's really close. Like everybody's making a ton of theoretical mistakes. And so it's still, in my opinion, still very much about figuring out the way that your opponent thinks, the way he plays certain hands, and where his leaks lie, and taking advantage. I think there's still a lot of room for that. Mm-hmm. And that got me more excited, because that's the part that I find fun. And that's the part that I think I'm good at.
Right. And you've mentioned that the qualities that make a good player today are pretty much the same as they were 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. Can you name some of those qualities? What do you think are?
That's a very good question. It's hard to sum up, because it's not, it's correlated with intelligence, but it's certainly not strictly intelligence. It's correlated with good deductive reasoning, logic. It's definitely a group of things, but I'm trying to think of a concise way to put it, and I don't really know. So let's try the less concise way. When you're, it's kind of just, I feel like, synthesizing a lot of information into kind of more simple. Man, I'm trying. So when you're playing somebody, you're taking note of showdowns. You're taking note of, all the other elements, like the bet sizings they're using, sometimes the timing they're using, and you're getting an idea of how they think through a hand. And when you have kind of a rough idea of that, then you think through what that might mean for how they play other hands in other spots. And another thing is, there's still just, look, the flop is this, the turn is this. Okay, what are the hands he's going to bluff with on the river? What are the hands he's going to value bet? What are the hands that, should be value betting that he's missing, or should not be bluffing that he is bluffing, or should be bluffing that he's not? And I guess in that sense, it's just quick thinking, because there are so many factors to go through that it's impossible to go through all of them. And so it's I guess quickly identifying the important ones and getting good rough guesses as to what they are. But yeah, it's hard to explain, but it's still, hand reading is still very much a thing. Even if somebody's playing closer to optimally, the way the board runs out, not all boards are equal. And, when you're studying a solver and you are studying a specific board and you get a good idea of bluff frequencies on that run out, a board that looks somewhat similar, things can still be quite a bit different. And maybe you face a smaller bet size on the flop, or maybe the turn got checked through this time compared to another time. That everybody still has to use their minds to give it their best shot at a balanced strategy. And in some cases, that would mean, bluffing with a hand that's like feels too strong to bluff with, or is uncomfortable to bluff with. And in some cases, it means making a value bet that's pretty scary, or, is unnatural. And so players' leaks will come from, first of all, maybe not realizing how large of a difference there is between this spot and the model in their mind. And then also come from emotional decisions, even at the highest levels, I think, where, it's easy to say, if I give you a hand and I give you 30 minutes, even without a solver, but just 30 minutes in pen and paper, you could probably come up with, okay, so I probably have, this many of this hand category, and I do need to bluff this hand that feels too strong to bluff with. But in game, you don't have time to figure that out. And it's very easy to say, I do have a lot of strong hands here. It's hard for me to have weaker than this, but I probably win so often when he's folding anyways. So I'm just check and it's over. And then that player doesn't bluff enough in that spot. And it doesn't mean that player doesn't bluff enough overall. They could overbluff overall, but there are spots where they're not going to. And so I think, figuring out, and it always has to be a rough guess because it's too hard to do in detail, but figuring out all those kind of dynamics and the type of hands your opponent's going to show up with, and based on that, which direction they're more likely to make a mistake in, I think is important, very important. And just no matter how much your opponent studies it, those things are going to be there.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. There's a few things I want to expand on here. So first of all, I want to ask you, do you think far ahead in the hand? Say, when you're on the flop, are you actually considering all sorts of variations?
Short answer is yes, but I actually think, if anything, I do a little bit too much of that. Because it's very easy to get caught up in, I think actually that's how I make some mistakes, because I will think, for example, if I bet this hand and I turn this 2-outer, it's going to look super deceptive and I'm going to stack him. So like, I really want to bet this hand that maybe shouldn't bet. And I'll end up making a play like that for future street deception on rare turns or rivers, which is not enough of a reason. I think it's important to think ahead, but the level to which I think I should think ahead and where I should stop is, let's make sure I'm covered on a certain number of runouts in both my, checking and betting range or my raising and calling range. I think going too far beyond that is well, at least for me personally, I end up making more mistakes than extra good plays.
Right. And what about your memory? Because you keep saying that you pay attention to the bet sizes, the timing tells, how people played a hand in a specific situation. Would you say that you are actually pretty good at remembering what happened in the match?
My memories, I would describe as has a mind of its own. Sometimes I just can't remember really simple things that I want to, and other times I remember very obscure things from forever ago. I have pretty good memory when it comes to hands that have played out. That usually I remember pretty well. Things like, what a betting range looks like in a solver on a certain run. I'm terrible at remembering. I do think that, all the things I just went into about reviewing showdowns from opponents and getting an idea of how they play, I think a lot of that is subconscious for me. And I kind of get I can tell you that I feel that I have a good idea of how ActionFreak thinks through a hand and how he plays, but I don't think I could describe it to you. So that's the best way I can explain it.
Sort of intuitive for you.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. And I mean, I just want to kind of summarize what I understood from what you're saying, because I firmly believe that, you basically pointed out all of the things that I believe as well to be hugely important. And namely, the one of the key things you've mentioned is the time constraint. Give 30 minutes to a guy. Sure, every decision can be trivial, or somebody can overthink and then they go really obscure. But within the time constraints of the hand, you have to make a decision and you have to simplify the information that is available, because to be honest, there's way too much information. You have to boil it down to what's important. Now, boiling down to what's important is difficult when emotions play a role, right? So staying calm throughout. And I think that was one of the things that you were really good at throughout the challenges so far, that you didn't let the emotions dictate the course of play. I mean, potentially it happened before you took the break against VeniVidi, but apart from that period of a few days, we didn't see, at least on the outside, we didn't see that affect you. And sure, it did. I mean, you're not a robot. Of course, it did affect you, but potentially it might affect other people slightly more. And oftentimes, as players, we don't even realize that it has an effect. But because of the time constraint and you have to simplify information, you have to make a decision based on this simplification. Emotions cloud your judgment very often, and you simplify in a way that suits your narrative very often when you're emotional.
Yes, yeah, well said. It's easy for a player who loves to value bet thinly to come up with a reason to value bet thinly. I think that for me, it's hard to know how other players feel during a hand. I think I'm very calm from I don't really get angry. From that perspective, I'm pretty calm. I think I would guess that my emotions during a hand, like my excitement or fear of making certain plays, I think probably are about average. But I think a strength of mine is that I'm very aware of them. I always can tell what I'm feeling, and usually maybe not usually, but often can catch it even during a hand and say like, oh, I want to check here. Okay, hold on. Is it really right to check, or you just want to check? And catch myself. And I think actually being very aware of my own feelings, excitement, fear, all those things help me understand how other players feel pretty well.
Mm-hmm. And that was actually, speaking of that, oh, I want to check, I'm going to check and wait a minute. That's a great point that you bring up, because of how often you faced the check raise on the river, for example.
Yeah.
A lot of people would basically be very uncomfortable with what am I supposed to do, but you kept relentlessly still making the bets, and you faced the check raise again. And can you talk me through that? Like, when these plays were happening, what was going on through your mind, and what were you feeling really?
I think one thing I saw happen a lot, especially in the VeniVidi match, is I noticed that like naturally I have more fear of betting the river in position than out of position, because if you check the river out of position, you can still face a pot size bet. And obviously if you check the river in position, you can just show down. So I think that's pretty common among players, but I think actually I never felt like I was, well, maybe not never, but I don't feel like I was betting too often in position on the river, because I actually think my fears kept me in check there for the most part. I think out of position, what ended up happening is I was just like small betting too often with any hand that could justify a small bet for a large portion of the match. And he was raising a lot, and I wasn't combating it very well. And I think that's because there was no emotional barrier to making a small bet out of position, because it doesn't open me up to a check raise. He can bet anyways. But as far as betting in position, I still think that I think early in the match, I was doing, in that match in particular, I was doing too much betting in position too thinly for value, and probably correctly as bluffs corresponding to how often I was value betting. But I think I was value betting too thinly and putting in too much money in a lot of spots. But I don't think that had nothing to do with emotions. It was just I was rusty, and based on the bit of studying I did, I was overvaluing hands essentially. And he adjusted by trapping me quite a bit, and getting me to value cut and getting those check raises in. And over the course of the match, I realized that, and what he was doing was just normal, maybe some slight deviations to take advantage of the fact that I was putting in too much money against checks. But I just realized, with more study and just seeing the results of the hands, that I was, I realized that I was putting in too much money. So what I would check a little bit more often with hands that could have value bet thinly. I also sized down more than I was early in the match. Early in the match, a lot of my sizings were pot, both on turn and river, especially in position. And I made sure to size down more when I was relatively capped, because there are all these spots where you're relatively capped, but you still want a value betting range. You don't necessarily have to pot it in those spots and open yourself up to getting a lot of money kind of shoved in your face. So those were more strategic things than emotional things, and actually not at all what you asked. But that's kind of how I saw that dynamic go. As far as the kind of discomfort element, I still feel some fear in those spots. Like I think everybody does in a large pot when you have the opportunity to bet river and can get jammed on. But I do catch myself, and I'll feel the fear, but I'll say, you know what, he is only going to have a better hand like 10% of the time. So I just have to make this bet. And if it's that 10% of the time, so be it. So yeah, I do still feel that fear and discomfort in a lot of spots, but I just kind of reason my way through it.
Right. But it's interesting to, let me illustrate one thing for you, because I know a lot of people, and I know myself at one point in my career, I was also, let's say, guilty of that or struggling with a specific thing. Let's say let's take a simple situation. Let's say I make a bet and I was apprehensive before making a bet. I'm like, probably shouldn't be doing this, et cetera, et cetera. Then I get the check raise. And then you get, oh, for fuck's sake, what happened? This is bad. I'm hating this. This is a stupid situation. And you know what? 4 seconds, 5 seconds passed, and we only have so much time. And we talked previously about how important it is to basically do the most you can in the limited time that you have to simplify the things. But all the self-talk is anything but helpful in simplifying things, and also wastes a lot of time, and then adds this emotional aspect of you're not even thinking straight. You're not thinking through all the facts. You're just thinking about something else. So when you say that you were still feeling slightly apprehensive, let's say, before making some of those plays, but then once you make the play, I would assume you still sort of fall back on your decision-making process first and foremost, and it doesn't really go through 4 seconds of self-talk of like how bad this situation is for you.
Yeah, no, I think if anything, the mistakes that I made in those spots have been like the whole time I'm timing down before betting, I'm like really, really on the fence. I'm like, I don't know if I should bet this. And then I bet. The mistakes that I make often are I get check raise and I just snap fold because I was like, I shouldn't have bet. Like, this is one of my thinnest bets. I shouldn't have bet. But I usually catch myself before that happens. I guess maybe I have a second or two. Not so much of self-talk, but more of like a just like, all right. and then go into the thought process. But I don't take too long to get to the thought process part. But yeah, the mistakes that I've made have been reacting too quickly to a spot where, I was like, because it's kind of natural, not only from an emotional perspective, but also it's easy to kind of use the logical shortcut of like, well, this is clearly the bottom of my value betting range because I almost didn't even bet it, so I can just fold. But there's more to it than that, and you have to stop and think through the spot.
All right. I feel like we talked about the sort of micro scale, the one decision, one hand type of thing. Obviously, slightly talked about, the course of a day, for example, when you are going to have some emotional, swings, let's say, emotional swings throughout the day. But what was so special about your challenge is that it's basically 5 days a week. Your breaks are pre-scheduled. So regardless of how bad the day before was, you're going to be playing.
Yep.
And I think for a lot of people, that is a big problem, because to switch off from one day to another, come back fresh and stay focused on the thing. The worst thing that can happen is you have your day off some 4 days from now and you have to keep playing, and that day off is not coming. You don't have a fallback. How did you deal with that?
It was hard, but I think, equally hard for my opponents, at least. I actually went into it thinking it was not going to be that challenging a schedule because, with the Veni match, we only played 4 hours most days. Sometimes we played 5, but it's mostly 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, which is, it's a 20-hour work week, but which is nothing. But obviously there's studying in between, and I actually still don't know. I don't know if it was the nature of the challenge because it was strictly scheduled and because it was on a big stage and because it was so intense for those reasons that it was so draining, or if heads up PLO is more draining than I remember it from 5 years ago. But it was hard. It was draining. I was exhausted at the end of every day. Even before the end of the session, I was exhausted. So that aspect in and of itself was difficult. And then, like you said, the emotional aspect, I don't generally tilt too badly, but I do like to take days off if I'm not feeling optimistic or not feeling good, which, will happen, of course, when you when you lose, and you don't really get that option. Obviously, we have some. There were some days off on both of our sides that we each paid for, but it was hard sometimes going back in the next day, especially the way that the challenge started. But I found for myself that I found the challenges incredibly stressful and demanding emotionally outside of the hours of play. But while I was playing, I found that I was able to let all that go and just play. I was certainly affected by it because, when you're like tense the rest of the day, when you're not sleeping as much, it affects your play. But as far as thinking about anything besides poker, once we were playing poker, I was not. I was just playing. So that at least was good. But I was surprised by how intense I found the challenge as a whole, throughout the days, throughout the weeks.
Mm-hmm. What do you think was adding the intensity there? Because you've mentioned the public aspect, right? That it was basically for everybody to see. Some people were harsh to you on Twitter.
Sure.
And all of those things.
It wasn't even my results. That didn't bother me. I still found the ActionFreak match intense, even when I started up with a big lead. I think it's the structure of it. Whatever. I've always found tournaments, even small stakes tournaments, to be more intense than cash games, and because there is there's a winner, and like I don't, something about a structured competition, and it felt the same way with this, where it was just so different than a cash game session. You go in, you win or you lose, and then that's over, and you're on to the next day. But every hand that I played during this challenge, every day that I played counted towards whether I would win or lose in the end. And there's only one winner and one loser at the end of these. And so I just think the structure of a challenge made it feel so much more competitive to me. And I cared that much more about it than I would just a regular session.
Interesting. Do you think your opponents felt the same way? I mean, obviously, we're just speculating. There's no way of knowing.
I mean, I had some conversations with them. I think ActionFreak felt the same way. I know that he felt it was pretty intense, and I don't know if it was the competition aspect, but I know the scheduled aspect. He was not a big fan of. Once we started playing, it was intense for him. I know that. I don't. VeniVidi never gave me an indication that it was super intense for him. He seemed more relaxed, but also, I mean, he had to lead the whole time, of course, until the end. But yeah, I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Veni is very used to playing long hours and long sessions. So yeah, I think he was quite comfortable in the format of the challenge.
Yeah,
put it this way. Okay. How do you feel about, like, when you were walking into this, when you were starting the challenge, you obviously had some sort of perception how it's going to look like. And then what's the reality compared to what you expected?
As far as there are a few different things. As far as the, results, I was pretty confident going into the first challenge. And so to have it go the way it did at the start was was obviously, I mean, it's disappointing no matter what, but it was obviously very disappointing, and something I wasn't completely mentally prepared for. Because even if, I obviously knew that I could lose, but I just didn't envision, losing almost $1 million in it. I knew I could lose, but it just went so badly so quickly that that wasn't something it wasn't something that I was thinking about as a potential outcome, really, even though I knew that it, technically was. That was hard. As far as the whole, the production and all of that, I don't know. It went kind of at the start, it went kind of how I thought it would, I think, as far as, how popular it was, number of viewers, things like that. It got more and more people watched towards the end because of, I think, in large part the way the match played out. And so that was crazy to me how many people were watching at the end. But as far as the thing is, all of it as a whole went kind of how I expected. It was really hard to tell how much it helped RunItOnce Poker, because we kind of saw a steady increase in traffic from November to April. And there was no real indication. It was not obvious, once the challenge kicked in, it didn't, shoot up. It was just like the steady increase over that time. And then even once, lockdowns and quarantines across the world started happening, it just continued to steadily increase. And so I don't know what's responsible for the growth of the site. It did drop in May and the beginning of June, which with a lot of the industry. But anyways, I was kind of hopeful that it would help, like that we'd see a big spike in traffic from the challenge, and we didn't. I have to imagine it must have helped, but it's really hard to measure.
Well, at least you won the challenges. That's
yes,
that's good. Traffic might not have picked up, but
it didn't end up being the huge marketing expense on my part.
yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about what went through, because like that first challenge that you had against VeniVidi, right? It's safe to say it's gonna come down in the history of online poker, at least, as one of the most interesting things that happened. Of the publicity, it's one of the first, probably the first challenge of this sort, really. And the way it went, it's such an illustration for what PLO, heads up PLO is, because, sure, it's an unlikely swing, but it's not an impossible swing. Obviously, you've proven that, right? Mm-hmm. But that's always going to be there as an illustration of, what can happen. It also is going to be there as an illustration of what it takes to be a professional poker player, on any level, to be honest, because, okay, on your level, it happens to be $1 million swing. For somebody who's playing micro stakes, is probably, the question of whether they become a professional or not, maybe, because they can get wiped out and lose all the interest in the first 15 days and say, well, this game clearly sucks and I have no talent for it, right? And likewise, for some people, it's an unreasonable expectation of what they can achieve, right? Because they might get into the first 10,000 hands and they absolutely crush, and they keep going up the stakes until they get the reality check. And, we all know those stories, but so it's such an illustration on so many levels of what's happening, what can happen, et cetera, But this, I don't want to say case study because there's no case study about it, but how you guys handled it from the mental game perspective, I think this is something that all of the sports can, in a way, take a lesson from, right? And I know that you obviously worked with Elliot Rowe a lot throughout the challenge. Can you maybe talk a bit about some of the key things that you found helpful for yourself to deal with that crazy situation that you were in?
I mean, what Elliot and I mostly worked on was what I said I ended up doing a good job of, which is letting it all go going into the sessions, individual sessions. And I guess also throughout the challenges, I would catch myself, in a given week or whatever. I'd say, like, he would help me figure out what I believed I needed to focus on, and usually from an emotional perspective. So sometimes it was, overcoming a fear of whatever, betting the turn with a hand that wants to value bet but really doesn't want to get check raised. It's a pretty common one. Whatever I was feeling at that moment, and during the VeniVidi challenge, there was a lot of those because because things were going so poorly for me, because every time I felt like I did this, I just saw a huge hand, and every time I, bluffed, it didn't work. So there was a lot of that, there wasn't necessarily a theme that spanned the whole challenge or multiple challenges, but at any given time that I felt like one of those was kind of weighing on me, we would talk about it and work on it. But mostly what we did was pre-session, relax and play poker, essentially. And I think that is, fortunately, I think I'm naturally decent at that anyways, but he helped me, be better at it, be very good at it. And I do feel like when I was playing, I wouldn't say I thought that I was going to have more fun while playing. It was a little too intense for me to have as much fun as I thought I would. And that was something we tried to work on, but at least I was in the moment the whole time that I was playing.
And I want to, because I obviously I talk a lot about the importance of a team, importance of a coach, importance of, just a team in a simple way, right? And a lot of people seem to undervalue that aspect. And because when you say that the things that Elliot helped you with, you're naturally quite all right at, and to you, it's natural that even though I'm all right, I still need some extra push. I still need some extra supervision. Can you expand on that? Because throughout your career, you've been, getting coaching from other people. You've been coaching yourself. You did it from all the aspects. So what's your opinion about the importance of this in poker?
Yeah, I mean, every time, I don't think coaching is necessary, but I think that all of the biggest, leaps in my career have come just working with friends. And even friends who are, maybe playing even significantly smaller stakes or are not nearly as good as you. A lot can be gained just, I don't know exactly what aspect it is, but just even if you're explaining things to them, which I get through, training videos and have for so many years, and through some friendships, or, they're explaining things to you, or you're both trying to figure something out together. There's something about getting all of the thoughts that are inside your head out. And sometimes you have so many ideas, and so many things that you're trying to process, let's say from a solver trying to learn, and synthesize all this information. And while you have all these ideas in your head, you don't really know if any of them are right. You just have a lot of ideas that make sense to you. But if you can get them out, even to somebody it doesn't have to be a player who's better than you. It can be, of course, it helps. But you get those ideas out to somebody or a group of people, and you get a consensus about some of them. Okay, this idea, this seems to be right. Or you get some shot down and explained, why you're not right. It's really helpful to have and it's never certainty, because even if, 3 people agree on some idea of a right way to adjust in general to the population, you still might be wrong. But it's something about not just the ideas and the things you learn, but having some more confidence to kind of tuck that away as okay, that's something I basically know. Now I can move on to learn other things. I think that's really helpful. I have always kind of sought coaching because for me, I guess at every point in my poker career, I thought that I had a lot of career ahead of me. And it just always makes sense that if you pay a little bit now to accelerate your growth as a player, it's just going to pay dividends over the next 2, 5, 10 years, but very easily. So personally, I always sought coaching. I wouldn't even say I've had that many coaches, but whenever, I don't know, when I transitioned forever ago from sit and goes to no limit cash, I just sought out a few coaches just to like kickstart that that transition. I guess with PLO, I mostly watch training videos, but either way, I've always just invested in learning. For that reason, I think most people should. If you're not planning to stick around poker for a long time, maybe it doesn't make as much sense. But if you are, and you can afford whatever level of coaching that makes sense for your bankroll, it's just like almost always, unless you have a bad coach leading you in the wrong direction, it's always going to pay dividends.
Yeah. But even if you're not sticking around for long, then the question is, why not quit today? Why stick around for another 6 months? Just leave. Yeah,
and that's actually usually the reason that somebody's not going to stick around for long, is because they're playing for the money and they don't love the game. Mm-hmm. And it can work, but especially in this day and age where games are tough compared to 10 years ago, I don't know. It's hard to succeed if you don't really want it and if you don't have a passion for it.
Absolutely. And one thing that you've mentioned was that when you're coaching and when you're making videos, for example, right, you have to voice your thoughts. And I always found, because I used to watch a lot of your videos back in the day, and I think that's the best material out there, hands down, right? Never mind, even the old videos, never mind the strategy. The strategy obviously evolved, they changed, you can't take everything face value anymore. But just to have you explain the thought process, it's incredible because you're to the point. Yeah. You're, it's very simple to understand, and yet you touch upon so many important aspects of every decision in every hand. Was it natural for you when you first started making videos, or did you sort of evolve into this, what I consider pretty high level of being able to basically voice your inner thoughts throughout the hand?
It was always natural for me. And in fact, I had when I was in high school, I was 16 or something, and I had an engineering class, and in it we would do like a project, and then after every project that would take a couple of weeks, we would write a report on the project and explain, what we learned and whatever. And one day after class, my teacher asked me to come back during lunch because he wanted to talk to me about something. Okay. And I came back and he said, there are writers in and he was the Washington Post. We lived right outside of DC. In like the Washington Post, who would write in their science section, and they explain these advanced concepts to everybody so that people can understand them. And I think you'd be really good at this. And I don't know what you're looking to do after school and, what careers you're interested in, but this is something I think you'd be really good at because you are. So all that to say, I was doing that already. I think the reason that I can do it naturally is that, first of all, I think in internal monologue pretty often rather than just like quick thoughts that are not verbalized in my head. Mm-hmm. So I do think in the way that I speak very often. And I think that I don't know how to put it, but like, I don't speak in big words. I don't know. I think that the way I think is high level, but I don't know. A lot of people will understand advanced concepts and explain them in a way that is just like using super, technical language. And I don't know if because they want to sound smart or it's the only way that they can say it, but I just don't think in that way. I feel like in my own mind, for myself to learn, think in simpler terms. And so it's just easier for me to explain it that way.
Right. Sort of efficient the way you explain.
Yeah.
And also, like, now that I think about it, if you're saying that pretty much when you're making a video of, voicing your thoughts, you're pretty much voicing your internal monologue,
yeah,
which also probably helps you with what you were describing earlier, catching yourself when you have emotions, because, well, those emotions are probably part of your internal monologue. And, it's much easier to catch yourself saying something to yourself, than just having these random thoughts. And that's very interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Okay. What else? Yeah, the Galfond challenge. We really covered a lot of interesting things.
Yeah.
You know what? Another thing I want to talk about. How was it at home? Basically, because sure, you play 4 or 5 hours a day, you do a few sessions of studies, but you have a little baby, you have a wife, you have other obligations, you have obligations towards your company, you have to do a bit of this, a bit of that, then a bit of PR, a bit of social media, whatever. Pretty busy day. So how was it basically being at home?
Yeah. I mean, I am thankful to a lot of people for making it easier on me. Like the RunItOnce team, is made up in part from players who are professional players and understand a match like this, and they did an excellent job of making sure that anything that they felt needed to run by me was condensed as much as possible. And I would have a maybe a 2-hour call once every 2 weeks, and that would get in there everything that they needed from me, and handle the rest on their own. So RunItOnce essentially ran without me in a lot of ways, and they did an excellent job of that. At home, it was very tough on Farah, my wife, because we went from from the age of basically right away. We left for Canada when our son was 1, like almost exactly, and up until then we had a 25 to 40 hour a week nanny helping out, and my schedule was less intense. So, and we went up to Canada and we had no help, and I was working a lot. So it all fell to Farah, which, I mean, I know that there are a lot of mothers out there that do it without the help of a nanny, but it was a big change for her from what had been happening in Vegas. And now we go up there. Not only that, but then, there's lockdown, and, she can no longer go take him to do certain activities, keep him busy. So they were cooped up, they were bored. And I actually, before we started all this, we had a conversation, and it was basically, it's easier for me to work when I have like a structured time frame. It's not like, oh, we'll see what happens today. Maybe I'll stop at this hour. Or maybe, if you need me, let me know. And so when we started, it was just like, all right, until wake up at 6 a.m. till 4 p.m. I'm on my own. I can do whatever I need to do. And that was really helpful. And I was very appreciative of that. Then, I spend the evening with them and help put them to bed and all those things. But once a couple months in, she was really struggling. They're basically sitting in one room all day with him, and they needed some help. And so towards the end of the Veni challenge, and then onward, I was working a little less. I was studying a little less, essentially, which was okay because, like most of the studying I needed to do was not so much opponent specific, but was just like getting caught up on theory which I was able to by that point. But yeah, I would quit earlier. And actually it was kind of flexible at that point. Some days I was like, I can't stop today. Sorry. And other days I was like, oh, the match is over. I don't really need to do much now. So I'll go help out. So yeah, she was very supportive. Obviously, sometimes days were rough on her, and I would, come in and help where I could. But also obviously the start of the first challenge was tough on all of us, just because of the results themselves. But yeah, I don't know. I'm have an understanding wife. It's not easy. It's not easy to go from wake up, pre-session prep, play, study, now take care of a baby, and then go to bed, like with no real downtime. Like we would have maybe literally 1 hour of we eat dinner while watching TV show and then go to bed. So like there was not much downtime. That was hard, but lots of people have to work a lot and have kids to take care of, and it definitely makes it a little harder than it was before being a dad, but well worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And can you switch off, like when you actually go to the family? How good are you at switching off?
I'm pretty bad at it, and that's something that I've talked to Elliot about we've tried a little bit, but I haven't made much progress there. I'm bad at switching off for sure. Always have been. And it's worse actually now that I have a business. As a poker player, it was hard to switch off, but when you run a business, you actually just can keep doing things. I guess with poker, you can keep studying on your phone, but like it's different with a business. There are always more things to do, and always like you can think of ideas, and you can respond to messages that you forgot to respond to emails. There are so many things to do that it is really hard for me to switch off. And it's something I need to work on quite a bit, because it's not that it's draining me. I'm fine, but I'm not, giving my family all of myself during those hours, which is not really fair to them. So I need to get better at switching off for sure.
And what about the days off? You have the same problem in days off as well?
Yeah. No days off.
Yeah. Because I was just wondering, the Galfond challenge, you have a day off, like 2 days off a week. They're obviously apart. How did your day off look like? I mean, surely you were not just chilling and drinking. That's obvious, but
no. So what we agreed to is basically my family gets me 1 full day a week. So I think with maybe all the challenges, we would usually take Wednesday and Sundays off. And Wednesdays is when I would do RunItOnce work and study. And Sundays, I would not do any of that. I would just be with the family. So Sundays were the official day off. But of course, your mind's still going. You still respond to emails on your phone and things like that.
Right. And what about the schedule? Because you had to wake up at 6 a.m. every day. Did you maintain a consistent schedule, or did you struggle to keep it consistent?
I did. At the very beginning, I struggled a little bit, but no, I kept it consistent, and it was not. I mean, it was hard in that I feel like actually 1 hour would have helped a lot, because I would like get up at 6, sometimes 6:30, and like I always felt rushed to get to the 8 a.m. start. So I think a little bit more time would have been good to wake up a little bit more. But of course, my opponents in Europe have the problem on the other end where they're staying up late to play, and it's pros and cons to each. And I did like, I don't know. I didn't feel quite ready usually at the start, but I was tired by the end. So had we gone an hour, pushed it an hour back, I don't know how I would have done at the end of the sessions.
Yeah. And were you always maintaining sort of a strict, not a strict, but a consistent schedule, or were you more of a typical poker player who is all over the place with the sleeping schedule?
Up until about 3 years ago, I was always all over the place. No schedule whatsoever. Usually, going to bed at, like 5, 6 a.m. and sleeping until 2 p.m. and stuff like that. But it's gone back and forth, because like when it's World Series poker time or I'm playing poker for a month, I lose my schedule. But outside of that, like again for the same reasons, because RunItOnce Poker is headquartered in Malta, and if I want to have meetings with those guys, it's got to be early in my morning. Actually, like initially when we first started and got the office out there, it was late at night. I would stay up late, and they would wake up early, and that's when we'd have our meetings. But for the last couple of years, it's been 8 a.m. meetings usually, sometimes earlier. So I've been on a pretty good schedule, on and off, but for a couple of years. And actually, once our son was born, well, once he started sleeping through the night, then that's what solidified the schedule is. Get up in the morning with him.
I was about to say that thing because it obviously happened to me as well. Because now going to sleep late is no longer a thing because
it's not an option.
You're getting that wake up call whether you want it or not.
Yeah,
it's coming. Yeah.
In Vancouver too. We were in it wasn't a small apartment by Vancouver standards, but it's smaller than our house here, certainly. And our bedroom was right next to his bedroom, just separated by a sliding glass door. So like you heard everything. So there was no sleeping in.
Oh, well, how do you like that actually? How are you enjoying
the earlier schedule?
No. I mean, the son
Fatherhood?
Being like, How old is he now? He's like 16
about
months
a year and a half. 17.
17 months. All right. So
it's
an amazing age. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's very fun, and there are just new things that every month, every couple of weeks is just new things that he's learned. Right. It's a very fun age so far. It seems like it keeps getting more fun though. So far. I guess once he started walking, it gets a little harder, but it keeps getting more fun. For sure. I enjoy it a lot. I am with him a lot. I don't do the brunt of the work because I'm doing the brunt of other work, but it's fantastic. It's exhausting because like I said, even if I'm only, watching him for a couple hours a day, it's at the end of doing a lot of other stuff. And there's not much downtime, but it's what everybody seems to say, which is that it's really hard and it's completely worth it. It's just true.
Yeah. Are you already thinking about when you're going to start teaching him games? By games, I mean probably, like cards, chess, Monopoly, whatever. I don't know.
I guess So we have 2 nieces that live here, 7 and 3, and I'm trying. I don't know off the top of my head when he'll be ready, but I feel like our 3-year-old niece is a little too young to be taught any kind of serious games. I don't know if your experience is different.
Well, my son's only like 21 months old right now. 20. Yeah. The only thing.
Yeah, I don't know. But I'll definitely be teaching him games.
Yeah, because I'm already kind of looking forward to it. Because I remember my grandfather used to teach me cards and chess when I was, I don't even know. I mean, like probably 3, maybe younger even, and I loved it. It was just whenever he's back from work, bring out the cards. I'm sort of worried about it because my office is at home, so like for yourself as well, right? And it's one thing to tell your wife, listen, I'm working, this is the office. It's another thing to try to tell your
4-year-old
toddler.
Yeah.
Oh well. Anyway, fun times. Phil, let's talk about a bit your company. I feel like we really kind of went through a lot of the topic of Galfond Challenge, right? I'm pretty happy to find out all these things that you talked about.
Well, it's the proper split because I've mostly been a poker player this year.
Right, so, exactly. Yeah. But RunItOnce Poker site, right? First of all, I don't think we need to go into too much detail about the things that you already extensively talked about your ideas. Why did you get into this, etc., etc.? And I think most people who at least read up about it all support you and all think, well, this is a great initiative and it's great to see you taking it on yourself to basically give a poker site for poker players by poker players. It's a great idea. Now, there's a lot of challenges ahead for poker industry. And today, in fact, you made a post on Twitter. Do you want to talk a bit about that? Like, what do you think are the challenges facing the online poker industry from the poker player's perspective, right? And so let's just go there and we'll see where this leads us.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest challenge is in order. First is AI, botting, real-time assistance software. The second is as good players get better, as there become more and more good players, the recreational players are losing faster and more consistently. And the third problem, or I should say threat, not necessarily problem. The first two are problems and threats. The third is more of a threat than a problem. But, the regulatory environment, you don't know what's going to happen 2 years from now. What countries are going to ban poker or make it like regulated and make it impossible to actually run a poker site there, things like that. That's more of the unknown threat, I think, the most unknown threat. I mean, I guess so. Botting is kind of the obvious. It's obvious why that's a threat. I think the loss rates of recreational players is maybe a little bit less obvious to people who are not, at least not pros. But I mean, essentially, when you have a very high loss rate compared to standard deviation, you're going to lose very consistently. You can run, variance calculators. And I think a lot of people don't realize, when you're sitting at a 6-max table with one recreational player and you're winning 4 big blinds per 100, he's not losing 4 big blinds per 100. He's everybody else, he's losing the 20 that everybody else is making if you're all, and then also the rake that, your actual win rate's not 4, it's whatever, let's say 6, and you pay 2 big blinds in rake. So like that's all coming from him. So you have a modest 4 big blind win rate. And that means that, he's, what is he losing? 30 big blinds per 100 there. And that's actually like actually that oftentimes it's worse than that. That's a pretty conservative scenario, even for a pure recreational player at mid to high stakes. And yeah, when you're losing 30 big blinds per 100 at a game that has 150 big blinds per 100 standard deviation, and you play for 4 hours, you're going to lose a lot. And the people that play for fun, people play blackjack, people play slots, people play roulette, and they know, most of them, that they're not a favorite, that in the long run, if they play a million hands of blackjack, they're going to lose unless you're counting cards. But they still win a lot. They're the house edge in some of those games is 3%, and they still come away with a lot of winning days. They can do some betting things to chase losses and actually have more winning days than losing days. But in poker, even if they come in knowing that they're an underdog to pros, it still becomes a lot less fun if they lose 7 out of 8 days or 12 out of 12 months. Because that's what's going to happen if they're playing any decent volume over the course of a month with that kind of loss rate. They're just almost always going to lose. And when the recreational players stop having fun, they find another recreational activity to do, and that's really bad for poker for obvious reasons. So I think that 15 years ago, pro win rates were higher often, but recreational loss rates were lower. It's because the ratio of pros to recs has gone up and up. So yeah, all that to say, it's in the best interest of online poker as a whole to reduce these loss rates or increase standard deviation and variance to a point where where recreational players are having fun and having more winning experiences more often. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people equate that with meaning that I want pros to win less, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean that. It often means the opposite. It means that their deposits are lasting longer, and therefore there are more of them in the player pool, and it means they redeposit more often, and therefore there are even more of them in the player pool. So yeah, you would be winning less from each individual one per individual session, but on the whole, it's a good thing for the economy, and it's not an easy thing to figure out how to do that as an operator, how to structure the game in that way. And actually, we have some interesting ideas that I'm very excited about that actually get to see a little bit of when we launch our sit and goes to combat things like that. But yeah, I think that's a very big threat that a lot of people don't think about. However, I still put botting above that in the number one spot because I think that, and that's the threat everybody is talking about because it's scary. Mm-hmm. Poker is, 10 years ago, or actually, I don't know how many years ago, but a certain number of years ago, during the course of my career, there were still players who could beat the best bots. And that's not the case anymore. The best spot is unbeatable. It doesn't matter how good you are of a player. You just can't beat it. And so that makes it all the more scary. It was already scary when, mid-stakes 6-max games on certain networks were, had a lot of bots and they're just taking money out of the economy, but they weren't like necessarily even better than the good players in those pools. They were just, taking some of the money out. And so, yeah, it gets scarier and scarier as we've reached, I don't know how many years ago, let's say 5 years ago in a lot of game types, that computers are better than humans. Don't quote me on the exact years. It depends on the game. Right? And so our philosophy at RunItOnce, and kind of mine personally, is that these tools are only going to get more advanced. Not necessarily in the way that they play, because it's kind of already solved. To the extent that it kind of matters, they might get slightly better, but it kind of doesn't matter at this point. They're so much better than humans. It doesn't matter. But obviously they have a lot of incentive to the developers who are creating bots, or the people that are hiring them to and then running them, have a lot of incentive financially to keep staying a step ahead of detection methods and prevention methods and things like that. And things like, no matter what you do with hand histories, they can scrape the screen. There are ways that they can get the data that they need to access all that information. There's nothing you can do to 100% prevent it from happening. So what we've always believed, and what I've always believed, is that you have to attack it with a combination of prevention, deterrence, annoyances, and then of course detection and punishment. And what most sites do is some sites don't even bother with the actual prevention. But I guess at this point it's not as big a deal. But so a lot of sites, you get instant hand histories downloads, and even have the chat box where it's actively telling you what the cards are. That makes it a little easier, but that's not a huge barrier anyways these days. But a lot of sites focus on detection, which is super important. A lot of sites, especially the major sites, do very well. Not a lot of sites focus on kind of creating these deterrents and annoyances that we've tried to create at RunItOnce with our cash games. The primary way that we do that currently, although we have a lot of ideas, is a splash spot in our cash games, which, as you know, will drop varying amounts of essentially antes in PLO. They're dead antes into the pot, and they can be any number of chips through 1 in 1,000. I mean, the way we build them is that they'll maybe only be one of 8 numbers at a given time, but we can always change what those numbers are. So does that prevent botting? Absolutely not. No. But it makes it so that bots that are running on other networks can't just, plug and play into ours, and because it's going to encounter formats that it hasn't seen before. And I think that I'm not at all claiming that we've solved the problem, because far from it. But I think that what Splash the Pot is which again, like we've done some other things, but that's the main thing so far, is a very good example of the kind of thing that needs to be done, along with all the other methods that other sites are doing. Because as good as a site's detection can be, if the stakes get high enough and the incentives get high enough, it can always be done in some way, and that's scary. I don't mean to paint a grim picture, because I do think that for the most part, bots are not a threat that are going to kill online poker. I think some people disagree. I don't think they're going to kill online poker, but they're a threat that's here to stay. There's never going to be a pure 100% solution. And so what sites have to do, and with sometimes the help of the community, is limit their essentially limit the number of them and limit their ability to succeed, punish effectively, do things like a lot of active investigations, things like that. You just try to make it as unprofitable as possible, or less profitable, least amount profitable. I can't find my words, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
And try to stay a step ahead of them technologically and with game structures and things like that. And I've talked to Rob Young a lot, Party Poker, about it, and it's pretty clear that he views it as also the biggest threat. And they have a lot of ideas, some that he's shared with me, and some that I'm sure he hasn't. He's working on solutions too, not only in detection. They have good detection as far as I understand, but also some game structure things. What he and I have both discussed and found is that when you change a game structure, you get a lot of resistance from the community. And we found that with Splash the Pot. A lot of players, and surprisingly, a lot of pros, more than recreational players. The recreational players, for the most part, didn't care. They enjoyed the game structure change. But actually, I think specifically a lot of the kind of the pros who have modest win rates, who are grinding it out to earn a living, it's the fear of the unknown. It's not what they've studied, and they don't know what's going to happen to their win rate in these games that they've played hands at the games that they play on other sites over the last couple of years, and they know what they're earning there. I think there's a fear of the unknown that it keeps a lot of people from playing. And while I'm not saying you have to come play at RunItOnce, I would encourage the community to be a little more open to all these sites when they try to implement changes that are there for the express purpose of preserving the future of online poker. Because I do think that it is going to require, especially at higher stakes, it's going to require game structure changes, and not just changing it to one new game, but actually over time consistently introducing new game structures to try to stay a step ahead. Now, all that said, I'm pretty sure that the way a lot of these solvers or bots are built, they can learn new game structures as well without that much time. But yeah, I think that, like, as a poker player, having an idea of like what aspects, you have to get creative and think of things to introduce that kind of take the human mind to figure out. And the kind of game structure equivalent of like a CAPTCHA, where it's things that are easier for the human brain to process than for a computer. And it's not easy to do, but I do think that there are options and opportunities over time to make games tougher to bot, or perhaps like lower edge to bot, and combining that with prevention, detection, punishment can limit their effectiveness. I said a whole lot, so I'll I'll take a break and let you speak.
Right. Yeah, I want to touch upon some of the things that you've mentioned here, and let's talk about, well, one thing that is easiest to address is what you've mentioned about the regs are the most resistant to, well, basically resistant to change, because well, there's a part that, like you said, a lot of people would feel they invested so much time in studying, and now they get that taken away from them from one part. But a lot of that, I feel, is just a sense of entitlement. A lot of poker players
Perhaps
seem to be under the impression that somehow the games run for them. Especially you see it acutely when you go to Vegas or any casino, really, in live games. You would see all these regs who, let's face it, are going to play wherever the game runs. If the game is good, they're just going to play it, right? Yet they constantly pose give a lot of trouble to the floor managers, etc., etc. Oh, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. They're not really the customer. They're just gonna, they're gonna do what they have to do, and that's the key part. Yeah. As a professional, you have to do what you have to do. You have to select the games. You have to, in a live setting, you have to be sociable, because if you're not, well, the game's not going to run. In an online world, perhaps you have to be thinking slightly longer term, because the things that you've just illustrated, the threats that we're facing, the reality is, if nobody does anything, well, then, whether you like it or not, as a poker player, you're not going to have a job. If nobody does anything, well, then it's going to be taken away from you once and for all, basically. Right? So what's more important is, what do the recreational players want? How do we figure that out? I mean, you guys are obviously trying to understand the mind of the recreational poker player, but because in the beginning you said that a lot of people would be recreational blackjack players or recreational poker players. A key difference there is, even if you're losing in both settings, you're losing in the blackjack, you're losing in poker, the reality of blackjack is such, you have a house edge, or the house has an edge, and that's about it. That explains everything. So you're going to get in there, and the game is not in your favor, and you're going to lose, and it's all good. If you play poker, you basically lose because you're worse than the other guys. And if, like you were saying, if you lose like 17 days, 8 days, 9 days, 20 days in a row, well, you're just bad, and it's not a pleasant thing. It's not fun.
I mean, a lot of people who play poker or who play these games in general, even if they play a losing game like blackjack or slots, like a lot of them have a competitive spirit of sorts, and the element in poker is going to attract even more people with a competitive spirit. And if you crush their competitive spirit, because it's just, they are just so clearly outmatched and losing so often, and they never get, it doesn't take much, and I guess this is me projecting a little bit or making assumptions, but, I believe that it doesn't take much. You have a losing day, you have a losing week, but 2 days that week you won. And on one of those days, you hero called the river with king high, and you were right against a tough player. Like, you need some moments, but you don't need all of the moments to go your way. You don't need half the moments to go your way. You just need some winning moments and some experiences where that given day or that given hand, you won. You were the better player for that hand. I think you do need that. Absolutely. I don't really blame players for advocating for the things that they want, even if they're pros. And actually, I do think one key element here that I think is kind of a common misconception is that a lot of the players who play relatively high volume, and this includes a lot of people in the, like poker forums and on, poker social media and interacting with people. And a lot of your higher volume players, a lot of those players are small losers over the course of time. I think people tend to view it as like there are these players who get crushed, and then there are all these pros. And there's a large chunk of players who are near break even or are, two big blind losers over time, who love the game. And, some of them then become winning players. A lot of them do, because a lot of people in that category are really passionate about the game and work on their game and care about it and spend a lot of time on it. But a lot of them don't also. And so you do have a lot of these players who are kind of feel like the same part of the community as what you consider, top pros to be, but are actually, a significant portion of the economy, because if you have a guy who's losing 2 big blinds per 100 compared to this guy who loses 30 big blinds per 100 but plays 200 hands a month, and this guy losing 2 big blinds per 100 is playing 25,000 hands a month, indefinitely, like those players actually mean a lot to the economy. Mm-hmm. And so it's important to listen to, and actually usually they want the same kind of things that the pros want. And that's actually one of the, I feel like one of the things I've found most is I think actually it's those players and the small winners who are the ones who have been resistant, and who have reacted really well to some of the changes we made, like introducing the Legends program, which is in addition to Splash the Pot, but a more traditional reward system where the more you play, you level up and you get cash prizes, or bonuses, or whatever you want to call them. And then we just introduced leaderboards, by the time this airs, I don't know, but very recently. And it does seem like, so it is hard to kind of parse all the opinions that come in. But I guess my only point there is that you should try to reach all of your player types, but some of the things that the pros are arguing for are things that losing players want to. But it's just not the pure recreationals necessarily. And so it's important to listen to everybody, absolutely. But kind of where I personally draw the line in not listening is, something that is going to very obvious to me, harm the game long term, or the health of the games long term, or anything that would, approach an unfair or unlevel playing field. Those are the things that I kind of don't listen to. But otherwise, we listen to everybody, and it is harder to reach the pure recreational players, because most of the people who join our Discord or who we see posting on social media or on forums are going to be in that category of somewhere between pro and small loser. And the pure recreationals are not going to be it's harder to reach them. And they're not in our networks necessarily, but we try.
Yeah. The problem of, resistance to change, it's a human problem. It's not a problem specific to regs or recreational players. And I realized, when I sort of started with my question, when I said, well, regs always feel entitled, et cetera, I feel like it might be misunderstood, because I definitely don't say that we shouldn't speak up as regs and that we shouldn't be listened to. We absolutely have to, but we have to be a bit more open-minded, right? Because I feel like oftentimes the discussion is very one-sided. The regs just push the narrative of, no, we're not making these concessions. This is bullshit. You're not going to do these changes. We hate it. Well, let's have a discussion about it. If you really hate it after all the discussion, after weighing all the pluses and minuses, sure, we can listen to it. But, I think as a community, there's a big part of our community that are just not open to a dialogue of any sort of changes, because one of the things that kind of makes it difficult for poker players and poker sites to cooperate on some issues is because of this constant perception that a group of like a big portion of our community has that poker sites do everything just to increase their rake. That is the problem. Whatever poker sites come up with, it's always, first of all, perceived, oh, you guys are clearly, you're just doing it, for your own good, which is not always the case. It's tough because poker players think sites are trying to get everything in their favor. They only care about the profits, which is not necessarily the case. Yes, as a poker site, you're supposed to care about your profits, but part of your profits is making sure that you have a business 5-10 years from now. So you need to obviously take care of the community, and somehow that is lost on many poker players because they think like, well, too short term of like, they're just doing this because of X.
I think Stars is very interesting because the previous owners, it's my understanding that they actually did sometimes sacrifice company profits for the good of poker community, which you could certainly argue paid dividends for them, as they kind of were the most popular site, the players' favorites for a long time. And I think while most businesses, or maybe all of them, are primarily concerned with the success of their business, I think there's a big differentiation between those which are, I guess the important part is figuring out if they are concerned about the long term, or if they're short-sighted, either because they haven't thought it through or because maybe they have another plan that involves them. And I do think that PokerStars, like when we launched RunItOnce, it was the idea came from being nervous that PokerStars was too worried about the short term, and had a long-term plan of kind of getting, pushing more players away from poker, to casino, to sports, and then creating poker games that are kind of more like casino games where nobody's really winning. It hasn't gone as far as I feared it would, fortunately for the poker world. But yeah, I think that, it's very possible, especially with all the threats facing online poker, it's definitely possible that a site thinks, what, poker in 10 years just is not going to be here. So let's make what we can now and get out. And I feared that that's what PokerStars was thinking. I don't know if they were. I don't know if they are. But yeah, I think that like I can speak for us, and I can speak for all the conversations I've had with Rob Young at Party Poker. We care about the future of online poker, and about creating a level playing field, and about what's good for the players. And I don't know that I don't necessarily know that every decision, that I'm not vouching for every decision they make indefinitely, but I know that his heart's in the right place for sure.
Well, time will tell how this all is going to play out, because let's face it, technology made huge leaps. Nowadays, some of the threats that are out there seemed like they're not going to be here for years to come, and yet, we are already battling them, and who knows what's going to happen a few years from now. I think first, go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay, I'll go. Yeah. I think there's some reason to be optimistic. Solvers have been around for quite a while, but I'm thinking back to guess I don't know what year it was, but like university bot teams were making heads up no limit bots. I remember talking to a team, I feel like it was 10 years ago, and they had a bot that was as good as top players. Mm-hmm. And so the ability, and that's as good as top players. There have been bots that can beat, mid-stakes 6-max games for a very long time. And bots that, can beat top players for a reasonably long time. And poker's not dead yet, certainly. I think that it'll continue to advance, but actually in some ways, I think we've kind of hit the peak. Like they can't improve strategically from this point, or at least not in any substantial way. So, if we survive the next few years, and I think it's been that way for a few years, and yeah, like basically what I'm saying is, I don't, with certainty, know why the situation's not worse than it is, but poker, is still healthy. Online poker is still healthy, still beatable at all levels. And these threats have been there. And, it's a testament to how well the sites have done, at least some of the sites, combating them. But I don't think that we're in a situation like 10 years. We're not in a situation where 10 years from now, bots are, much better strategically than they are now. The advancements may come in avoiding detection, but the advancements on the side of the operators will come in detection as well, and try to keep pace with them. So that's a reason I think to be optimistic. That if bots getting good enough to beat people meant that it was the end, or the end was near for online poker, I think the end would already be here.
Yeah.
And it's not.
Yeah. Another thing to be optimistic about, and I agree with you on what you just said, and I think clearly, we haven't experienced the end of poker as many people predicted. But another aspect to be optimistic, I compare it to chess in some way. When the Deep Blue came into the picture, a lot of people thought, well, this is the end. There was a lot of resistance from the chess community of, okay, well, there's, the romantic idea of a chess player is dead, because nowadays, the study techniques change, etc., etc. Did it make the game worse, or did it make it better? I would argue that it made it better, because, if we think about, sure, a chess player from 60, 70 years ago could still compete with a chess player of modern age. But in some formats of chess, if we think about like bullet games or some other types, they probably are not even like, it's not possible. They're not there, because the study techniques are completely different. So I think the same is likely to happen with poker. And you are a prime example of this. You stepped away for a while from actively playing poker. You stepped away. You didn't actively study with solvers. All the other people were sort of, getting at it. And then you challenged some of the top people, and we discussed it. The top qualities that are important remain the same. What it used to be 10 years ago, or what it is now. And it's going to remain true for quite a while, because like you said, especially for PLO, where nobody is close to playing GTO right now. And even with better study techniques, because of the complexity of the game, your human mind, or any mind, is not going to be able. Likewise, it's not able in chess. Like, we have all these chess engines which play a completely different game to what a human being can execute. Yet there's so much to learn from those chess engines, and so much to learn in a way of simplifying the concepts, simplifying the ideas, and implementing it in your decision-making process, not memorizing the ranges or the situations or the bet sizes is going to only get you so far, and that's not very far at all.
Yeah, no, I'm like, one of the things with the challenge and with kind of the future of myself as a poker player is I'm hopeful that, like, I'd like to keep working on my game and keep playing as to kind of prove that that it, like, I know that I'm saying working on my game, and I have studied solvers, but I haven't studied anywhere near anybody that's playing it professionally in the 25-50 Zoom pool or higher in terms of hours, like not even close. And so I don't know, I don't necessarily need to beat everybody, but I I do feel I've kind of already proved and would like to continue proving that solvers don't kill the game. They don't make, like, the game is still the game. And it's not about kind of what I feared it was about. It's not about memorization and who studies the hardest is going to come out on top necessarily. Poker's still poker. And I like to kind of, that's actually a big motivating factor for me to keep playing and keep playing tough opponents over time. To kind of, yeah. Well, and then hopefully if I do that and I say that to the world, that's proof that it's not just about studying. They'll believe me, because they might just think, oh, well, Phil just studied harder than all of them. So
right. But also, when we say studying, it's such a broad word.
Yeah.
Just because somebody spends 60 hours a week on a solver doesn't mean they're actually learning things that they can implement in game. Right? Sure, maybe if you play one table, etc., you always use your time bank or whatever, but in reality, for like the translation of just looking at the solutions, browsing solutions, and going through all these ideas, trying to memorize and actually implementing them, there's quite a gap for that to happen. So just the number of hours, that's not what matters. Is the quality of the hours you spend.
Yeah. No, one thing, and actually, I don't know about either ActionFreak or VeniVidi, their study methods or their tools, but I do know that a lot of top players out there have custom tools that they use to study. And I know a lot of players who I respect believe that, like winning good players that I respect, believe that that's like, if you don't have something that's not publicly available and you're playing against these guys who do, that you don't have a chance. And I don't have anything that's not publicly available. I don't use anything that's not publicly available. And I know that, there's a lot of variance in heads up PLO. I didn't beat either of those guys decisively at all. But I can at least compete. I think I proved that. And I don't know what they haven't and what they don't, but I know a lot of the players out there, have tools that I don't have access to. And I wouldn't say that it doesn't matter, but I certainly don't think that it matters that much. I think there's a lot more to it. Even if you have better study tools than your opponent, poker's still poker. And I firmly believe that.
Exactly. Especially, when we talked in the beginning of our conversation about the key traits or the key things, the qualities that you need as a poker player, memory was not one of the top ones. Having, notes and whatever is not part of it. You still make decisions. You still have to reason things out. And especially for a game like PLO, it's too complex for any tool to substitute the process of actually having a good decision-making process. Right? So I think...
maybe if somebody has, photographic memory that is just insane, maybe there's a point at which memory becomes super valuable. But at any reasonable memory strength, I don't think it's a big factor.
Yeah. And one thing, okay, let's imagine perfect photographic memory. Not only do you have to have that, you also have to couple it with being able to figure things out. It's just because you remember something. Because again, we're playing, if you were striving to play just purely GTO without trying to adapt to your opponent or trying to exploit, well, that's one way to go about it, but that's probably not the most efficient way to go about it anyway. So just memorizing things, and in reality, for people who are striving to memorize, they're probably slowing themselves down. They're obviously really talented in the way that they can process this information, but they probably could have done it more efficiently, in a way trying to distill the concepts out of the information that they're otherwise memorizing, trying to understand why, instead of trying to memorize what exactly to do.
Yeah, well said.
Oh, well, Phil, what else? What else? I mean, I feel like we covered some really, really important topics.
I talked a lot. I don't usually talk this much, but you gave me some open-ended topics.
Yeah, I did, but some important topics. And
yeah, absolutely.
I really appreciate that you share these things with us. And I think there's almost like two parts to the conversation. The one part which is going to be, I hope, very useful for a lot of people, to inspirational and useful in their own careers. And the other part is an important part. It touches all of us, everybody who plays poker recreationally, professionally. It is what we need to be thinking about. What's the future of the poker? And I don't think we can thank you enough for doing what you're doing. With the promotion of PLO, especially like from my perspective, you doing this, man. I mean, all of a sudden you bring PLO on the radar. It's a great thing, and
getting the respect it deserves.
Yeah, absolutely. And the site, and all of these initiatives, and it's just so great. It's incredible, and
thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Keep doing it, man, and good luck. Good luck with the rest of the challenges. When do you know anything about when you guys are restarting?
No, actually. So, for the moment, I'm stuck in the U.S. I've actually spoken with Chance about playing our match on WSOP.com potentially, and I've spoken with them about it as well. And it seems like it might be an option. He's very busy right now, so I'm waiting for him to lock in a date, and that will probably be my next match. And then after that, will depend. I mean, hopefully soon after that, can take a trip up to Canada or down to Mexico and play some of the other challenges and knock those out. I'm also talking to Brandon Adams because our challenge will be live, and so we've discussed that. But again, don't have any plans. I don't think. What is it? June, end of June. I don't think I'll have anything in. I won't have anything in July, and probably not in August either. So we have a little break in the action.
Oh well.
I'm not happy about it, but it is what it is.
Yeah, but I'm sure everybody's going to be waiting for the restart. And well, Phil, thanks again. I really appreciate you coming on. And
thanks for having me on. That's a good talk.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to get a regular email from me personally, where I share my key takeaways from each latest episode, go to runchuckspodcast.com and subscribe to my newsletter. And of course, I would really appreciate if you subscribe to my channel on YouTube and rate my podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or any other platform where you normally listen to your podcasts. This really helps.